Hello, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Dr. Craig Youthy. Dr. Youthy is Executive Director of Clinical Professionalism at Sanford Health and also the Well-Being Coach for medical students at the University of South Dakota. Dr. Youthy, thank you so much for joining us today on Hopeful Conversations and welcome.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
I guess I want to start by having you define the Director of Clinical Professionalism.
So I'm a family physician, and in my role as a family physician, I worked in practice for 25 years doing that. And we talk about our intelligence as being the most important thing in medicine, and it absolutely is. Our intellect is what we are determined getting into medical school. It's the filter that gets us into medical school. But it's how we apply our knowledge that makes all the difference in the world when it comes to patients and to the teams we work with. And up until about 10 years ago, emotional intelligence would be another term, interpersonal communication skills, that type of thing was never taught in medical schools. And so anytime there are concerns within the healthcare system where I work at Sanford Health, if there's physicians that were never taught that and they're being misinterpreted either by their teammates on the healthcare team or by patients, I've received training and have had experience in how do I help someone change or maybe modify what they're doing or what they're not doing by providing awareness so that they say, well, I wasn't trying to do that. Well, no one's trying to do it, yet you're being misinterpreted. So how can I maybe help you change how you're thinking so that maybe you can make a few changes and enhance your practice? And so physician coaching would be a term that's now used. That's a buzz term that's out there. And so I provide that service. And then as the chief well-being officer for the medical school, I have 280 medical students that I focus on the emotional intelligence education, the medical students. So we have brought it now into the medical education curriculum.
Very interesting field. I have a degree in psychology, so that's a little bit of my background.
Absolutely, very similar.
But learning emotional intelligence and learning how to build one's emotional intelligence. Is that fair to say that we can build our emotional intelligence?
Absolutely. Emotional intelligence has nothing to do with your IQ. It has everything to do with awareness and being made aware. Awareness is my key theme in that. Were you aware? And once you are aware, what do you want to do now with this newfound insight and knowledge that I have in the world around me?
Were you aware? Okay. Now I'm just going to pop into some questions that a teenager wrote for us. So kind of interesting after doing a little bit of research about you and the field of work that you practice in. Dr. Youthy, how can someone identify when they need to take a step back to focus on their self-care and their mental health? What could they be looking for in signs in themselves?
Great question. So one of the things we talk about is any change. If I notice any change in myself, what has caused that change to occur? And so it's maybe seen by someone else better than it's seen by an individual themselves. And so I'm going to start by just if you see it in somebody else and then go to the self-reflection, if that's okay.
Wonderful. Yes.
Okay. So if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you are a teenager and you have a friend, a close acquaintance, a family member who you see as changing, they become more withdrawn, or they became maybe more angrier, easier, short fuse, start thinking, making statements that just seem not in line to what they've normally done in the past. Reaching out and asking, stating what you notice. I see, Craig, that you've been withdrawing a bit more. It seems to me that you're just not as vocal as you had been. And just make that statement. You don't have to even ask a question because they'll generally respond to that. So we call it making a statement of what you observe. And if you have an inflection in it, that's really like asking a question. I see that you just seem a little bit quieter to me lately. I'm not asking a question, but it is a question. The thing I like about that approach is it's non-intimidating. It makes the person think, okay, they saw that in me. That person actually values me.
Mhm.
They're being validated in that statement. Wow, I was noticed. That's one of the things that is an alarm for people is I'm not noticed. I'm a nobody. There's nobody seeing me. I'm all alone.
Yeah.
And one of our terms is never worry alone.
Yeah, I read about
Absolutely.
that. I want to learn more about that. Never worry alone.
Mhm. And so, just looking at that same thing as far as a change goes, now the self-reflection would be, am I not sleeping? Sleep to me is maybe the number one thing to focus on in your own day, in your own personal health. So I like to look at your physical, your mental, your spiritual health. Those are the three big ones. I grew up being a camp counselor at a YMCA camp, and it was the body, mind, and spirit. And I think that's one of the things that triggered me to being interested in medicine was I just love that holistic approach to well-being. And so I always say the best way to start your day is to get a good night's sleep the night before.
Mm, good
So if a
advice.
person is not sleeping well, not getting enough sleep, or maybe feeling sleepy all the time, those are symptoms we call that, or they're signs that there may be a problem. So I say that to anyone, teenager, adult. If you are finding you're having some sleep disturbance, why is that?
Mhm. Do
And then addressing it.
physicians still use the 2-week time frame, like 14 days or more, if a change persists?
Yes, I think that's a great um, um, general rule to follow would be 2 weeks. Yep, there's some regarding mental health issues that might be going on with that. And so I think of like depression, for example. I sense there are two general types of depression. Some depression is just not controllable. It's just the way we're wired. Um, the antidepressant Prozac, fluoxetine, they came into use when I was a medical student. And they talk about the 1940s with World War II antibiotics. Penicillin came in. They said it's the greatest drug there's ever been. I don't disagree with that. I would say the development of the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, the SSRI antidepressants, in the mid 1980s was absolutely revolutionary, just like the antibiotics were. It brought an antidepressant that changed people's endogenous or innate or uncontrollable, unreasonable depression. That medication can improve that. So individuals that have depression, that's more of a brain chemistry abnormality that a person has no control over. When they are taking a medicine like a fluoxetine, Prozac, within a month, that person will say to me, I never really did think I was that depressed, but I can tell you right now, I am sleeping so much better. I used to have these negative thoughts. I don't have these negative thoughts anymore. I was so anxious. I'm not anxious anymore. And I'll say, well, I think that might be the medication working. And they'll say to me, well, I don't feel anything. I'll say, well, you just described some very subtle things that make me think the medication is working. Generally speaking, as a physician, then we'll say, these are inexpensive medicines. They have very few side effects. You're really doing very well. I would recommend staying on these for 6 months,
Okay.
touching base with me, and you let me know if you want to go off them or not. But since you're telling me that you're doing better but don't feel anything is wonderful news to me.
Yeah, I've read that it's like about raising your baseline. That's the, is that a good, but I,
Yes.
the part that's still hard, learning more and more about the field of mental health and the treatment of depression and clinical depression
Mhm.
from the 1980s to 2024. Why is it still so hard for a physician to like dial in a medicine for an individual that struggles? Why is there that long 6-week time where may have to increase the dose or decrease the dose, and versus like if I had my yearly mammogram and I found out that I had cancer, my treatment would be, I think maybe I'm misunderstanding, but they pretty accurate from the get-go.
Well, it's hard to know why it's not easier. I can only say it from my perspective, but I sure wish I had a blood test or an X-ray that I could do that would give me the answer. Many times is I'm going by symptoms, by non-specific details, and so I may not be certain with my decision. And so I find asking someone if they'd be willing to go on an antidepressant for a short period of time is there's such low risk and high yield. And having done it for so long, I feel very comfortable having the conversation. It's an illness no different than asthma, hypertension, diabetes. It just happens to do with brain chemistry that it would take thousands of dollars of a functional MRI to identify a change and maybe not even see something in that setting. And there's no blood test that I can do. And so I just find that my experience has been so overwhelmingly positive to those that take it, where there's low risk. I will say, now, any medicine you would take, even if I gave you a sugar pill, for the first week, you might have symptoms, side effects. It could be anything from blurred vision to a headache to a stomach ache. I mean, it's just, they're called non-specific symptoms. If you can get through that the first week, those tend to go away. And then it takes about 4 weeks to really notice if there's a change or not. And you come back and tell me. I will make the decision with you. You are the one that will decide if you stay on the medicine or not. I'm just there to help be your guide. It's your body, it's your health, it's your feelings, your emotions. You are in a much better position to tell me. And my experience has been that over 50% of the time, you're going to find that you're doing much better. Now, there's also situational depression, which is not something that you were, quote unquote, born with, or it's not something that's a biochemical imbalance. It's from all the pressures you've been feeling over the last few days, weeks, months, years. And so in that situation, maybe an antidepressant will be helpful. It has been found to be helpful short term, especially for situational depression. And so it can be effective. It's just that the underlying stressors need to be addressed. And that's where seeing a counselor would be helpful, is how do I now develop skills to be able to stand up to these pressures that are out there? Life is not easy. Life is not fair. It's always going to be hard. So how can we help you develop skills that will help you then persevere, be resilient, be self-assured? People that go on an antidepressant for depression, 50% of the time it's a one-time episode, and the person, after 6 months or so of being on a depressant, will not have a recurrence of depression and go on a medication. 50% of patients may have a recurrence and say, oh my goodness, I'm getting back into that situation I was before. I'm going to call Dr. Youthy because I think I need to go back on the medicine. I need to at least talk to him about it.
Well, those are good statistics to know, for everyone to know. This is interesting. I've been studying this field for 5 years and looking at it from so many different angles, and even thinking about like some of the stigmas of taking a medicine, or recognizing those feelings of self or in someone else, subtle changes where they don't seem to be themselves or thriving, those changes. There's a lot there.
Thanks for bringing that up. I find the most difficult hurdle I may have to overcome is the hurdle of the person saying, boy, I shouldn't have to take that pill, or I'm stronger than that. Or, well, I'm not a faithful person then, if they're spiritual. And I'm going, uh, I don't, the spirituality, I don't think is the same thing as this. You can be very faithful in your religion, in your faith that you have, and that is different than your mental brain health. I have patients that are very faithful in their lives and they're diabetic and they have to take insulin and they don't think anything about that. But yet when it comes to brain science and serotonin levels, we seem to think that's different.
Right. Yeah, very much. Oh, goodness. So you mentioned never worry alone. And I also read a little bit that an accountability partner is maybe something that would be good for an individual that maybe is struggling a bit. Can you explain that and how that relates to self-care?
Yep, I'm sorry that you cut out for just a second. I
Did
missed that question.
yeah, we're having a little bit of a slow
Yep.
speed here. We'll work through that. I
Okay.
was reading a little bit about an accountability partner and self-care. What is the relationship there?
So I received special training in addiction medicine, and I went and became certified in something called the Myers-Briggs Type Inventory in the same year, 25 years ago. And in that setting, what I learned was how do I approach people and deal with individuals and how they can understand themselves better, how they can change, and in that, improve in their self-awareness and in their self-care. And so in that, I found that fascinating and so educational for me on both fronts regarding that. And so when it comes to self-care, it is your physical well-being. Am I sleeping okay? What am I eating? What am I drinking? And am I being active? What is my activity level? Now, am I exercising? Movement is so important in that. And so then that gets more into face computer screen time and what's healthy screen time, what's unhealthy screen time. And so I really focus on those components. That's very important in that aspect. Um, so that's your physical health. Um, Ask me the question one more time again.
Accountability partner for
Oh, the
self-care.
accountability partner. So when it comes to self-care, I emphasize those pieces and I say, okay, let's just take our physical well-being first. Okay. I want to change my eating habits. I want to change my drinking habits. If a person is drinking alcohol, for example, if they're eating what we call pleasure foods, those may not be healthy for us. So I ask somebody, okay, what do you want to change in your life when you have this awareness now in your own well-being? And so we talk about awareness. Then we talk about what kind of an attitude do I take to my awareness? Do I want to take a positive attitude like, I can do this? I want to make this change. Or are you going to take an attitude of, oh, I'll never be able to do that. I can't do that. And so can you see the difference in the attitude as to how successful you might be? And so once I have this awareness that I want to make a change in my personal well-being, what attitude am I going to bring to it? Is it going to be optimistic? Is it going to be hopeful? Or is it going to be self-defeating, like, I can't do this? What's that story that person that's staring you in the mirror say to you in the morning? If they're saying, hey, you can't do this, you need to kick that person out of the house. Not easy to do, but
No,
but
it's
that's
not.
that's the attitude piece. Then the next one is action. Action is okay. I want to eat less junk food. I want to eat a healthier diet. I want to eat at mealtime, not be snacking. So it's what do I want to start doing? What do I want to stop doing? And then is there anything I want to continue doing that might be good? That's the action. Those are okay. What do I want to start doing? What do I want to stop doing? What's going okay that I will continue? Those are all good, but if you really want to see change and sustainability, the fourth A is accountability. And you need to be accountable to another human being. I have an accountability partner. It's another man. He lives here in Sioux Falls, not in healthcare. He and his family were patients of mine, and he and I got into a book club. And then I reached out to him about 15 years ago and said, "Hey, you know, I really like where your values are. We have families that are in similar stages of their life. You're not in medicine, which I kind of like that. Would you be interested in just connecting sometime just to help each other be better people?" And he looked at me a little weird and said, "That's a little weird, but yeah, let's do that." 15 years later, we meet weekly or, 2, 3 times a week for 1 hour in the morning for coffee. And it's really just to be accountable to each other to be better people. And
Interesting.
it's been very healthy, very healthy.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That can be, I would imagine, hard for lots of people in different stages of their lives to identify who could be a good accountability partner and even making that ask. But I know from my own journey of loss and trying to
Hmm.
grow and trying to take care of
Hmm.
myself, being held accountable and has certainly helped.
Yeah, it's that statement. When you are able to share important things in your life with someone, it doubles the joys and it halves the sorrows. And I really truly believe that. And it all comes back down to a friend of mine who's a clinical counselor, and his mantra is never worry alone. That's
I think
just the one rule. Never worry alone. Always reach out to someone.
I would imagine that's a hard thing for most people because a lot of people worry alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why um, having someone there that you feel comfortable with to reach out to. Who's that person that if you woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you'd feel comfortable calling and they'd be glad that you're answering the phone? That's what I always think. Who's that person in your life that you would feel comfortable with? Find that person.
Makes me think that teenagers are who Robbie's Hope we talk to a lot. And in my own parenting journey, we teach kids the term trusted adult.
Hmm.
And because I don't, I think Robbie trusted me. I know,
Hmm.
I shouldn't say I know Robbie
Yeah.
trusted me, but Robbie didn't come to me in his deepest moment of need. And
Hmm.
after doing a lot of research, that's quite typical for a lot of youth, teenagers
Yes.
in particular. So I wish that I would have taught Robbie that there are other people that he can trust as well. He had great adults in his life. He had great friends. For a teenager, I think an adult as a trusted adult, do you learn? Are medical students teaching that or learning that?
Oh, it's the theme in medical school. It's a very stressful time in life. It's distressing, and healthcare profession is just a stressful environment. And so, medical schools don't just filter out for intelligence. They really do filter out for perseverance and determination. And those are characteristics that are essential in medicine. And as we say, any strength that's taken too far is no longer a strength. And so perseverance, self-reliance, perfectionism, competition, you can see where they're all very important, good characteristics, but when they're taken too far, it can be a problem. And I appreciate that we can only set the environment and a positive environment for a person to hopefully reach out. But we can put somebody in the best environment possible, and there's still that may not happen because we are wired to be protective. We are wired to not want to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so I think I always say, let's create the environment for success, and that's all we can do. The beauty of life is we have freedom to be who we want to be. The risk with that is we aren't always going to make the right decision. And
Hmm.
sometimes those decisions can have significant consequences. But in order to have that freedom, that's the risk.
Hmm. Oh goodness, there's a lot there. I also, I guess, I there was one other thing that I read about in preparing for today that I like, and what can I do internally is a question that I heard you pose to others, boiling down to what do I have control over? What can you share with our listeners about control and controlling internally?
Great statement. I think the first thing to learn about control is think of your hand as a closed, tight fist. That's control. And control in of itself is just not sustainable. Just not sustainable. So control would be, do I have the ability? It's like the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so anytime a person is trying to control, there's an issue going on. There's some kind of an ambivalence, or there's some kind of an issue that a person is struggling with. Okay. Why do I want to control? I want to control good and not have bad. So I have this ambivalence to that. If it's a specific problem to a specific issue, I need to reach out and we'll figure out what that problem is and help solve that. Most of the things that we deal are not things that we actually control ourselves. And so then we have to say, how do I want to emotionally respond to this? Because there's nothing I can do about it. The pandemic was the perfect example. Okay. None of us could change the pandemic. I spent a lot of time worrying and losing and burning energy about things I had no control over. So then when that happens, it's okay. I have this awareness now that I don't have any control over this. Now that I'm aware of it, what attitude do I want to take? Do I want to be sad? Do I want to be angry? Do I want to be scared? Or do I want to maybe change it in a way and say, okay, what do I do in this situation when I want control? I need to loosen up, let go, and say, let me let somebody else enter this in my world with me. I call them the rocks in our backpack.
The rocks in our backpack. Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah. For me as a physician, when I was a resident, I had so many external rocks, patients, clinic, delivering babies, going to the nursing home, dealing with all the things, all these external rocks in my backpack. It was very heavy. And the more I had good partners to work with me, to share our rocks with each other was so helpful. The external rocks tend to be, I think, the easier one because it's the work we can see. It's the internal rock of, oh, Craig, you're never going to be able to do all this. That's a big rock in my backpack.
Heavy.
I'm the only one that carries that rock. Well, gosh, how can I get rid of that rock? Well, I need to change my attitude towards that because we all carry our internal rocks. And I find that our internal rocks tend to be heavier than the external rocks. And that burden gets pretty heavy at times.
Certainly
and
does.
So being able to say, hey, you know what? I've been dealing with this. I've had people that are struggling and they'll just unload to somebody about that. I worked with a physician who felt a lot of anger internally. He says, but I can't show that anger because that's just not professional. I agree. So now that you just were telling me about that, how do you feel? And the surgeon said, wow, I feel better just having said that. And I said, well, it's because you literally exerted your energy outward instead of inward in your mind. Just that little simple action. So what do you want to do in the future to help release that pressure valve?
Oh, it's so interesting. It's just, and some of it for like teenagers today, I think of like how kids like social media, because how we started this conversation about what signs and what are we looking for. You talked about like making I statements, like I have noticed this, and how that internalizes for that individual hearing, like someone else cares. I'm not in this alone. This isn't just internal. Um, there's a lot here. Self-care.
I want to make one more statement that just profoundly impacted me years ago. I can't remember who said it, where it was, but somebody that was wise on the radio once said, identity is very important, who we think we are. And this speaker said, here's a dangerous way to look at the world. He says, we are not who we think we are, and we're not who others think we are. Oftentimes we live our life because we approach it, I am who I think others think I am. I sometimes act and behave because that's how I see myself. I see myself how I think others see me.
Versus,
I am who I am. Here's my identity. I like who I am. These are my values. I have an exercise that I use almost with everybody anymore in my work that I do. I learned it from my patients doing private practice for dozens of years, being in and out of that clinic door over 125,000 times. I learned that everyone has priorities in their life. What do you live your life for? Who do you live your life for? And I say, what are your 3 top priorities in life? The 5 most common responses, and I've done this individually, done these in groups, I've had people write it down anonymously. The 5 most common answers to our 3 top priorities in our American culture is the 3 F's, family, friends, and faith. And the other 2 are my self-care, my personal well-being, and my work or school. Those are the most common 3 top priorities in life. I say, so what are those things that you're willing to live for? And what are those things that you'd be willing to die for? And that's those 3, what are those 3 things? And then remember them, don't forget them. And if it is family, this is what I've learned over years, is when it's family, that word family doesn't help you in actually making this exercise work. You need to list out who those people are. When you say it's family, who is that? Well, your dog or your cat, yeah, that's family. They're not a pet, they're family. It may be a biological relative, it may not be. And we've learned over the years, the shorter the list, the more manageable the list. So when I'm asked to do something, hey, Craig, would you do this? Dr. Yuthi would do this? I think, okay, how is this going to impact my family? That includes A, B, C, and D. And then we ask, what are your 5 core values? And that's where the identity comes in. What do you value? Is it courage? Is it hope? Is it accountability? Is it fairness? Is it listening? What are your values? Is it perseverance? Is it acceptance? Is it tolerance? I mean, you could go on. And I listed like 120 different values. We ask people, what are your 5 core values? That's your identity. Is if I was to say that word, so courage, hope, friendship, peace, then ask, what does that actually look like? If you saw someone with that, what does that look like? And then when you see it, go hang out with it. We like to hang out with our values. That's how you find identity.
I could keep talking to you for a long time. This is just like, this is what I read about. This is what I'm thinking about. This is what I'm working with my own therapist about. Like, as a 51-year-old who's had a traumatic experience, but is trying to live my best life, help others, who is Kari? Who is my identity?
Yes.
What are my values? And learning, like, I think that there was just wisdom there, like how big our family is and how sometimes we want to, physicians, people who go to the field, we want to help everybody, but who can we really have an impact and help truly? It's very, very interesting. Thank you so much. I wanted to talk about gratitude too. I think I know that's something that you are fond of.
That's a core value for some people. And we say your number one top priority is your firm anchor. So that is if you were at the end of your rope and the last thing, you just didn't have anything left to hope for, what do you put all your hope into? That's your firm anchor, your number one top priority. Family, friends, faith, my well-being, my work I do. And then your 5 core values, we say, what's the number one common thread? So if your life was a tapestry, your values was a tapestry, what's that one common thread you want to go through everything? What would that be?
I think this is going to be a good podcast for our listeners. There's lots to give them, just good things to be thinking about. But we do have to end our time. And we end every podcast with the same question, Dr. Yuthi. What does the world need to hear right now?
Never worry alone. Always reach out.
Thank you.
Because we are all valuable. We all have meaning and purpose, and we're valued.
Thank you so much.
You're
to
welcome.
Our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And until our next episode, remember, hope, hold on, pain ends. And Dr. Yuthi, thank you so much for your time today. So appreciate it.
My privilege, Kari. Nice to visit with you.